This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Jonathan Brill. He is the futurist in residence at Amazon, executive chairman of the Center for Radical Change, and former global futurist and research director at HP. Ranked the #1 futurist in the world by Forbes and the world's leading transformation architect by Harvard Business Review, Brill draws on decades of experience as an AI inventor, tech executive, and intelligence strategist. His teams have developed over 350 products, generating tens of billions of dollars in new revenue, and his work has transformed innovation at organizations from KPMG to the U.S. Secret Service. He's a featured expert on ABC News, CNBC, CNN, and CBS, and has taught at Harvard, Duke, CERN, and Stanford. His new book is AI and the Octopus Organization, Building the Super Intelligent Firm. So Jonathan, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So just give us a little context. The bio is impressive, surely, but just tell us a little bit, maybe like where you grew up and how you got into this futuristic world that you live in and scares other people to death.
So I grew up in the Northeast of the United States between Boston and Maine. And so I got to hang out in the academic underbelly of Cambridge, and I got to live in a fishing village that was whose economy was being depleted as I grew up. And so I've seen kind of both sides of the world, the world that is impacted by the technology and the world that drives it.
Mhm.
What I think is important in the bigger picture is a simple question. There's 8.5 billion of us on the planet, about 1 billion to live like you and I. In the next few years, that will increase 50%. By the middle of the century, that will double. The question is, how do we do that in peace? And how do we do that in prosperity? And
Yeah.
at the center of that is artificial intelligence. At the center of that is more humane organizations. And at the center of that is a rapid acceleration of innovation across the planet.
Yeah, for sure. Now you've written this book that's as we said, AI and the Octopus Organization. So I love the analogy using the octopus. So just maybe in a nutshell, describe why you picked the octopus as your symbol, so to speak, of what organization should be like.
When we think about the organization of the 21st century so far, the organization of the 20th century, it's really built on the methods of the railroads of the 19th century and the kind of the great man theory that there's some big brain at the top that tells everybody else what to do. And that worked in a world where we had strategy and then we had execution. And it works in the world where we have agility, we have strategy and execution at the same time. But in the world we're moving into, and I don't know if you've noticed this, we seem to be moving faster than we have a strategy most of the time.
Yeah.
And so how do you operate when people have to make innovation and have to make decisions faster than you can tell them what to do? It turns out that in nature, there's the central nervous system, the basis of how our nerves are wired. But there are other ways of thinking. There are other types of minds in nature. The octopus doesn't have one brain, it has 9. It has a big brain, which is about 30% of its neural tissue. The majority is either in the shoulders that are attached to the arms, and weirdly, these are called arms, not tentacles. And all the way down to the very tip of each arm. Each little sucker has intelligence in it. When you look very carefully at how an octopus operates, generally, there's a reason why it looks like it's completely random. And that is because they are literally thinking, the tentacles, the arms are literally thinking separately. until one of them notices something, one of them discovers something. And all of a sudden, that intelligence rolls up into, let's call them the tentacle brains, or the small brains, and they talk to each other and they decide what they're going to do, and then they tell the big brain what they just did. So instead of command and control being top down, it's actually bottom up. It's a very different way of looking at the world. And in a universe where in the next 5 years, AI might get 30 times better. We think it'll get over 32 times more accurate in terms of the output in the next 5 years or so. In that world, every single person in your organization, I mean, the intern you want to fire, is going to be smarter than Einstein with AI. And how do you lead? How do you lead Einsteins? I spent the better part of 20 years running contract research and development firms, literally dealing with super geniuses who just had social issues. And my job was to figure out not to tell them what to do, but how to explain to the rest of the world what was the value of their invention. And what I discovered is, in that world where people are innovating faster than you can tell them what to do, you need to figure out how to align them, but also how to free them to out innovate, outperform anything you could imagine. And in that is the idea of the Octopus organization, that we need to move from telling the people in our organizations what to do to figuring out how to use artificial intelligence to redefine the architecture of our firms, to redefine the routines, the things we do, and then to redefine the culture so that people are free to outperform what we could even imagine.
And in the book, you talk about how the mistake that a lot of businesses are making is trying to unleash these new AI systems in a system that isn't capable of utilizing. Just like you said, that they're old and they're outdated. So you put an AI system into that, and it's going to struggle. It's not going to reach its potential.
It's going to do two things. We already see it, right? There's methodological issues with this recent report uh, from MIT, but the story is true. They say 95% of AI projects fail. I don't know if that's true or not. What I can tell you is that the underlying point, which is that the organizations don't change their structure to take advantage of the tools, that is 100% true. And what we're seeing are two things right now. I don't know if you've noticed these yet, but there's this new breed of super powered project managers who are like, I've got to hit the target. I got to hit the moment. I got to hit the day. Jonathan hasn't responded in 36 seconds, so I'm just going to do his work for him. And then you have a whole bunch of senior leaders who have had all his work done for them, and they have no idea what it is, and it makes no sense, and it's AI gibberish. And no one's coordinated, and no one understands the politics. And we're trying to figure out how to operate in this world of mental confetti. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, we need to do two things. One is figure out how to up level those project managers, how to work with AI to help them make better decisions, make better communications, give them better context, give them comfort that maybe it doesn't really need to be done in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And really help them start thinking a lot more like senior leaders than like junior leaders. And that's the potential.
And I think you describe it as octopus organizations. You say are built for speed, resilience, radical adaptability. So those are things that theoretically, might make sense, but practically it's kind of like, okay, how do we do that? What do we do? And I think what I hear you're saying is we have to be comfortable with letting people have more autonomy and letting them do their thing. So to bring it back to the group so that as a whole we can go forward. Is that what you're saying?
It's two things. So in the academy, we've spent 25, 35 years now saying you need to build psychological safety, you need agility, you need all of design thinking, whatever it is, right? And what I see generally in organizations is people put up a bunch of post-it notes and then you get the same results. Why? Right? The reason why is, and we need to be servant leaders and we need to mentor, like all these things, right? But like is a leader. I have a 50-hour-a-week job, and I might have 50 people underneath me. So if I actually mentor them an hour a week, that means that I don't do my job. The thing
Hmm.
is, artificial intelligence can actually work with people to think through frameworks. You can have a senior partner from KPMG or McKinsey in everybody's pocket in a couple of years. That's a game changer, that everybody has a personal coach. The second piece is, after this conversation, you're probably going to look at your your auto transcription, or I use read.ai is the one I like. And over the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, when you think about that in a 50-person organization, a 5,000-person organization, a 50,000-person organization, all of a sudden the types of dashboards about what's going on that CEOs dream of, right, are available to your intern. Right? You can get contextual information about what's going on, who you need to talk to, how to work, what you might want to pay attention to, a new employee who needs some help, automatically on your dashboard. The third piece, and AI, I think, is getting dramatically better at not hallucinating, especially when you look at the higher end tools, the paid tools, the $100, $200 a month tools. But the thing is, it's still very capable of hallucinating. Why? And it's because it's using statistical analysis. It's a probabilistic assessment of what happens next. Why is that important? Because when you think about senior leaders, right, they're good at making decisions. We're going to give your interns those skills. They have context about what's going on across the organization and across the industry. We're going to give your interns those skills. But they've also just screwed up enough stuff in life. They got a pretty good idea when something's a pretty bad idea. Well,
Hmm.
when you have an AI tool to do scenario planning, to do game theoretic work at the same scale as like nation states use today, or we use for major M&A deals today, but your intern has it in their pocket and they're able to use that, certainly to help you with your supply chain issues, but also to figure out where to go to lunch, right? All of a sudden, what you realize is this deep intelligence that we thought only senior leaders can have is in the depths, in the bowels of your organization too. And the cool thing is, as a senior leader, the reason that you don't bring down those decision rights is because you can't see what's going on. Well, these same tools give you that capability as well, far more than you ever had before, far more than you can possibly imagine. And so, in that world, you know, things can look a lot more like an octopus. The intelligence bubbles up from the bottom, but there's a second aspect of the octopus, which is occasionally it will turn its eye and it will look at one tentacle and it will take control of that and move it around to do a thing that maybe the tentacle couldn't do on its own. The other seven tentacles are all doing their own thing. My point here is that you don't lose control by giving up command in an organization like this, because the technology offsets a lot of the limitations of traditional governments, traditional organization, traditional leadership styles. And in that is a hard truth that so many of us, right, we spent 20, 30 years getting good at the skills I was just talking about. And now they've been commoditized. Now we've got to give them up. And it's going to be a hard emotional process for a lot of leaders. There's a second truth here, which is that there are things that happen in life. There is a reason why senior leaders tend to be in their 40s, 50s, 60s. It's not an accident. And it's not because they went to a better business school. Like, all that might help. But the underlying thing that happens typically in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s is, a parent has died. You might have gone through a divorce. You've had a sick child. You've dealt with a major disease. In that emotional process of dealing with that, you learn how to separate your experience of the world from the world as it is. And
Hmm.
that is the differentiator of a senior leader from a junior leader. It's that ability to step back and say, what is true versus what do I believe? And where am I wrong? Where might my assumptions turn out to be untrue and my instincts be guiding me in the wrong direction? We need to give those skills to more junior leaders earlier in their careers.
So do you think that the fear associated with AI taking over, so to speak, so many things, is the fear from the upper leadership, the fear of losing control that they've had before, or do you think the fear is from the lower level worker who feels like they're going to be replaced?
I think there's concern all around. And what we're talking about are billions of people having this conversation
Yeah.
based on some stuff they saw in Hollywood movies. And I think we need to get really specific about what are the roles that will be impacted, how will we change things, and where is there a lack of work today, right? Where are we? Where are the opportunities that we don't even think about today because it's too complex, it's too expensive, it's too fatiguing, but a person plus AI could do them no brainer. I think we're going to find a lot of those opportunities. The second thing is, what are the things that we should be doing? So when I was a middle manager, I spent 65% of my time in alignment meetings. That meant that I spent about 150, 160% of my 40-hour work week just trying to stay afloat, right? Because I had my actual day job too, the thing that was actually in my job description. Where are those things that we should just be freeing people up from? And then I think that the thing that's hard to get one's head around is, what would I do if I had an army of Einsteins in my
Mhm.
pocket? Right? What would that, like, what could I create? And when we take a look at labor, one of the places that we've been concerned in the United States about AI is self-driving vehicles, self-driving trucks. The
Mhm.
reality, though, is that there's a 325,000 person shortage of truck drivers going to 1.2 million in 2030, according to the American Trucking Association. So, do you believe that AI is going to be used to replace some mom and pop truck and some physical capital, some truck that's got another 10-year life in it? Or are you going to go and go after those 1.2 million open slots where no one's competing? Right. I think that the reality is people are going to try and cost reduce with artificial intelligence. They're going to try and offset labor. And as is typically with the case with these things, it's not going to work. And we're going to have to find these other places. What are those things that we could never do before? And then what are the things that we would never do before because it was just too painful, expensive, annoying? Those are the opportunities. And if I had to pick where is the big play, it's at that bottom. It's the annoying stuff, the just the things like, I'm the head of invention at a company called Deep Invent, and we're making it possible for your mom to write patents. Because the reality is, companies typically don't develop IP protection until after they've developed their product, which is too late
Mhm.
in a fast moving industry. So we give you the ability, a typical product manager or project manager for 45 minutes, not trained as an inventor, to write a patent or a series of patents that will protect a business idea
Mhm.
at the click of a button for a buck.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Interesting.
that's a $500,000 process to. So what are those things you just wouldn't do?
Yeah.
Those are the opportunities.
And what do you when you see, in the news today, we see, all these massive layoffs from Amazon, Microsoft, Google, whatever, that tends to feed this fear even more. What do you, from your futuristic view, what is that telling you? What are they doing and why are they doing that?
Amazon is refocusing itself to be an AI company. It kind of missed some of the early steps in this process, and it's playing a bit of catch up.
Hmm.
I think that there's a conversation that it's about AI. We're getting more efficient because of AI, but the reality is we overhired during COVID, and we're slowly you know, draining the company. That there
Mm.
isn't a lot of evidence right now that AI is actually taking jobs. That's a story that is exciting in the news media and it's exciting to analysts. But when you talk to the labor economists like David Otter, the data's not there.
So if I'm a newer professional and I'm looking at my career in the future, what do I do to prepare for this new age of AI for my personal career? What advice would you give to that person to be ready for this new world?
So I think there are two answers to that question. The first is, do we end up in the science fiction future where we have, AI that's smarter than people at all things? Or do we have AI that really helps us out? We don't know. Right now, all of the evidence is that we're going to have AI that really helps us out. There is this other science fiction thing that could happen. It's going to require about 3 or 4 Nobel Prizes for it to happen, but it could happen. Just it's not dramatically more likely than it was like 5 years ago. So we have this belief about what AI is going to do, and we're putting $1 trillion or so a year into that belief. So I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying that there isn't a lot of evidence yet. The second perspective, which is where we can find some control, is that we are going to all be superpowered. And that means that we need to be dramatically more effective. We all need to think like senior leaders. We need to learn, um, when you go to an uh, elementary school, high school, college, what they really focus on is what's called epistemology, the study of how we know new things. And there's a whole range of ways to do that, but there are four that matter. And these are the things you need to focus on. And by the way, if you went to school at all, this is all they taught you. They just forgot to tell you.
Okay.
One, how do I improve my deductive reasoning? How do I think like a lawyer? How do I do algebra? This is what you learned in high school, right? A plus B must always equal C, right? How do you think like that? The universe of facts is all there. How do you figure it out? The second is, how do I think like a scientist? How do I use inductive reasoning? How do I do a test or series of tests to figure out what is the most likely thing to be true? Um, it's in business we talk about lean startup. It's the same type of methodology. The third piece is what's called Bayesian reasoning, and it's statistical reasoning. So this is what data scientists do. This is what economists do. This is what epidemiologists do, and it's big, hard, mathy stuff. And most people never really learn how to do it. The cool thing is that with AI, A, it can teach you, but B, it's good at it. And C, with these tools, you can start to do things that that used to require someone with a PhD. The
Mhm.
third, the fourth piece is what's called abductive reasoning. And this is a lot of what I do. It's thinking like an inventor, right? It's asking two questions. One, what would happen if something new came to light? How would it change my actions? And two, what would happen if it turned out my facts were untrue? How would it change my actions? If you get good at those four skills, deductive reasoning, thinking like a lawyer, inductive reasoning, thinking like a scientist, Bayesian reasoning, thinking like a statistician, and abductive reasoning, thinking like an inventor, that's kind of the full skill set that will allow you to superpower these tools. There are also, when you understand where your weaknesses are, things that AI can superpower for you because you can say, hey, I fall back on these things. Help me think like that. Instead of
Yeah.
answering the question, help me ask
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah. And when you were involved in designing and inventing, so to speak, the first smartphone, correct?
Steve, my business partner, was.
Okay.
I,
Okay.
I,
So
I worked on Microsoft Surface and a whole range of early touchscreen technologies and similar things.
okay, when you look at, how that's transformed our society and how we do daily things and whatever, how does that compare to this AI world we're headed towards? Is it, it seemed like such a big transformation for our society. Yet
Mhm.
to me, it almost feels like that's going to be small compared to what we're dealing with now.
So that shrunk space and time. This shrinks work. It's a different, it's a found it's a foundationally different thing.
Okay.
Um, what these tools do in terms of business process uh, is on par with uh, writing the first document, right? So in Mesopotamia, 5,500 years ago, some priests got a clay tablet and he wrote on the clay tablet, and that was their first document production. And then he gave that tablet to someone else, and that was the first document workflow. These tools remove the need to create documents in that kind of way, right? So literally, like since then, all the way through the Gutenberg press, through the modern web page, right? We essentially produce documents. In the world of artificial intelligence, we produce data, and AI produces or structures that information for us. It's a foundationally different way of thinking,
Mhm.
and I think it's far more dramatic than the smartphone.
And you said in the book too, I thought this was interesting when you said when AI bridges from remarkable thinking to remarkable semi-autonomous action, that's when the
Mhm.
possibilities explode. So describe that a little bit more so we can understand more in detail what that means.
So right now we have AI. First of all, less than 1% of people are using the most advanced tools right now. And so
Mhm.
there's this disconnect between what most people experience and what is possible. Uh, what we're going to see in the next 36 months or so is that AI moves from being a thing that helps us do work to replacing tasks, doing things we wouldn't do, continuously monitoring things we wouldn't continuously monitor, writing software for us. And right now that stuff doesn't really work that well, but writing software for us to help us achieve goals we wouldn't know how to achieve on our own. Um, as that occurs, AI is going to be doing more and more work without us looking. That gets very exciting. When you look at some examples that are going on in the physical world, because they're just easier to imagine. We have self-driving cars. Waymo is in New York and Arizona, and I'm sorry, San Francisco and Arizona, Los Angeles, Austin, a number of cities now. It's moving into London next year, going international. That's an example of a semi-autonomous thing. There's still some person in the background looking at 20 cars, making sure that nothing's like blowing up, but 95% of the work is automated. It's going to change the nature of livery services, because at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of stuff that does need a driver in it. Food delivery, maybe, for in some cases, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't. And right now, when it costs, I think it was $85 to get from the airport in London to my hotel room here. When that drops to 8.5, something radical is going to change. It's not that we will decrease the amount of taxis we take. We will increase the amount by an order of magnitude. When you think about in Miami and Chicago right now, there are these igloo coolers with four wheels on them. Some made by Serve Robotics, another one made by Coco. And there are thousands of these things on the streets spinning around like R2D2 delivering pizzas, which is just like mind blowing to me. Like,
Yeah.
and it's not like a PR stunt. Like I've actually sat in restaurants. I've watched people put the bag in the thing and send it off. I've almost been run over by one of these things walking down the street. Like they're real,
Yeah.
and they're here now. And the question to me is, okay, well, if that food delivery moves from doubling the cost of the food to being the same price, what else are we going to deliver? Magic markers, post-it notes, you know, uh, like it's going to change the entire retail supply chain uh, across the United States, across the world in the next 5 years. That doesn't mean that retail stores go away. It doesn't mean that delivery services go away. It means that we have an order of magnitude more work. It's just going to be done in a different way.
So the idea of Bezos with his drones delivering things to your back porch isn't that far off.
Uh, we see that already in China. It's not happening at scale here. I question the economics of a lot of that stuff. Do I want drone delivered burritos? I'm not sure. Uh, but I'm sure there's an application somewhere.
Yeah. It's another thing that I picked up that I thought was a good statement is you said AI's breakthrough lies in amplifying the human coordination, not replacing it. And
Mm.
again, that's that makes sense to me because you hear so much negative, but it could really be a very positive thing of doing things that one humans maybe don't like to do and aren't very good at, where perhaps working with this system, we can just reach a much higher potential of the impact we can have.
We most of us want to work in a flow state more of the time, and very rarely is that flow state in an alignment meeting. And
Yeah.
so the question becomes, okay, well, how do we end up doing more of that? Right? How do we end up spending more time feeling productive, um, and less time just trying to tell people what to do? At the end of the day, right, so much of the work we do in middle management and senior management in companies is political. It's moving information across silos, coordination across silos. That's a thing that got better with email, but even today, your average middle manager is spending more time in meetings than they are doing work. And maybe that is the work. But I know that politics won't go away. At the end of the day, we're great apes. We're going to continue flinging feces at each other for some time. But,
Yeah.
but the other thing I know is that we we don't need to spend as much time and pain and suffering and stupidity, um, on just getting from point A to point B in a world where AI can manage a lot more of the coordination. That doesn't mean that the amount of coordination decreases or the number of people coordinating decreases. It probably means it goes through the roof because AI can manage a lot more complexity, so organizations can take on a lot.
So in the book, again, going back to the octopus analogy, you have these chapters or these categories: 8 arms, a neural necklace, 3 hearts. That you use in the book to describe certain things that we ought to embrace and get more comfortable with. So can you summarize that in a nutshell? Some of those type of things that I just brought up
Yeah.
that how they work.
So we were talking about the 8 arms earlier. That what happens when your business functions are able to operate separately and yet be coordinated, without needing to go up and down, information needing to go up and down silos. What does that look like? Um, AI is going to make that possible. We talk about uh, this idea of, today when we look at organizations, there's a freeze and thaw method, or there's some other project management approach to allow companies to plan and then execute. At HP, typically 3 months of the year, kind of budgets are held up, and uh, innovations held up, and you just kind of sit there for the executives to executive stuff out. In a world where you can very quickly shift focus and shift energy, um, I think that becomes a lot less true. And you were talking about the layoffs at Amazon. What you see there is a massive shrinking of middle management, right? And what you saw in the last month or two, or the last week or two, is a shrinking higher up the stack. But you're talking about a pretty significant thinning out of management layers, because they think that managers are going to be able to do a lot more, have a lot more ownership, uh, per hour worked. And we'll see if it's true.
Yeah.
We'll see if it's true. I think that at a certain point you start to lose all of the knowledge you spent, 20, 30 years building up in an organization like that. And I'm a little nervous that that's happening as well. Maybe that's necessary for reinvention too. I don't know. So we talked about uh, the point of the three hearts is that there's a fascinating thing that happens in an octopus, which is it doesn't have one heart, it has three. And when it needs to focus, when it needs to push its energy in one place or another, it can literally give itself a heart attack and turn off one of the hearts so that it
Hmm.
can focus all of its energy on jetting if it needs to get out of something quickly, for instance, and then reboot. And the question that I think we need to ask as organizations is, how do we get that modularity in place to jet and then reboot? And how do we create the psychological safety for the people who get turned off for a moment, that there's something at the other side of that? Because at the end of the day, that's the thing that decreases agility. It's people being fearful of losing power, of losing control, of losing their jobs. And that's going to be the critical thing, I think, moving forward, is how do we build that psychological safety? How do we give people the ability to leverage help, right? Incentivize that instead of disincentivizing that in times of fear. How do we take some of this free time to build unexpected connections? Like I said, at the end of the day, you know, we're still monkeys. And uh, the fact that I've met you means that I'm going to trust you when I'm scared, and then going to
Hmm.
open up opportunities for you because you've been good to me, right? Those are things you learn as a senior leader that you don't necessarily know at the early stages of middle management. And as we free up time, I think that's going to be a lot more important to coordination. And then the last piece is, how do you create a culture, right, where um, people are not so focused on uh, managing risk as they have, or managing risk to maintain the current status quo, but managing risk to make new things possible. And when you do that, you need to look at the world through, really a first principles perspective. Right? What do I know about the situation? What about it similar to what I've seen before? What about it's different? How am I going to manage the risk in this situation, as opposed to just dropping on some standard operating procedures and saying that worked before? Because in the world we're moving into, like, there's this company called Lovable. It's a vibe. They write vibe coding software. So people
Yeah.
who don't aren't programmers can say, I want a website, and it'll make a website for it. Maybe not well yet, but it will. And the thing is that they've gone from 0 to $100 million ARR in 8 months.
Hmm.
The question you should be asking, right, is like, if an opportunity to go from 0 to $100 million popped out of nowhere, could you absorb it? Or if you're a larger company, Amazon's an amazing company, right, in so many ways. But during COVID, in 90 days, they did 10 years of growth in their retail business. If that opportunity appeared to become the infrastructure of the United States, for instance, right, could you absorb it?
Hmm.
Because it's these disruptions, it's these seismic events in the economy and technology and supply chains that provide the new openings in a world where everybody else is smarter than Einstein. It's not that you're smarter. It's not that you have a better idea. It's that you're able to execute with greater finesse. And when you take a look at what a company like Amazon's doing, thinning out its middle management, what they're really trying to do is enable people lower in the organization to do a lot more, and give that finesse, give that flexibility, give that agility to everybody in the firm.
And then the final analogy that you make with the octopus is that the reason that it's lasted all this millions and millions of years as a species is because it was able to adapt and do these things and that we talked about before. And so, and the analogy is businesses have to learn how to do that too. They have to learn how to evolve in a way that's going to use these techniques to augment what they do. But, if you just try and fight it, or if you try and stick this new thing into an old system, it's just not going to get there.
You might get that 10% opportunity, but you're certainly not going to get the 1,000% opportunity if you try and operate like you have.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
I worked with the Yellow Pages, and I don't know if you remember that.
Oh,
For
yeah.
the unions, they used to call them phone books,
Yeah.
and uh, in 1998 or so, they could have bought Google for $500,000. Vinod Khosla tried to buy Google for $500,000, and they wanted to sell, and he couldn't get the capital to do it. In 2002, they could have bought it for a couple $1 billion. 2006, you go down the line, but they come to me in 2012 and they're like, well, we've got this idea. We're going to compete with Google.
Yeah.
I was like a little late. So
Yeah.
my question is, how long do you think this transformation takes? Right. I think at the back end of 2026, we're going to see some economic value out of AI. 2027, 2028, companies are going to have to really think about how do they transform their business functions. 29, 30, we're going to see real architectural shifts in businesses. Um, and by the mid 2030s, early 2030s, this technology will really be relatively mature. And so the question at that point, is have you built the culture to thrive? That's going to be the longest lead time, typically about 7 years for a mid to large size company. Have you
No.
built the technology infrastructure? That's typically a 3-year process to bring in SAP or Oracle or whatever in a large company. And have you built the architecture? Yeah, it's typically a 2-year process for an M&A to settle out in a large size company. And so the question to ask is, when do you think that inflection point happens? I think it's 2030, maybe 2032. People in the academy, very few people think it's 2035 at this point. Um, and so when do you think it is, and how do you back out your time scale to take advantage of this, to win, to play with greater agility and have more fun? It's up to you.
Yeah, this topic is so large and complex. And so in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to be sure and get in as we wind down here?
Well, I'm just excited to have this conversation with you. You can find more about me at jonathanbrill.com, and you can pick up AI and the Octopus organization on Amazon, and most
Yeah.
of the place books are sold.
It's a fascinating book. I really it made my mind stretch, and that's cool, because you talk a lot in there too about how we need to try things and experiment with things and see if they work, and if they don't, then adjust and whatever. We just can't work in a world where we always play it safe. We need to stretch out a little bit. So
Well, the thing that people miss is, in kind of project management programs, they teach you to control what you can and ignore the rest. The problem is, in times of disruption, what you can control changes.
yeah,
What we need to do is get ahead of that.
for sure. Well, Jonathan, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. So that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Always ask what you don't know, but you should.
Okay.
Your intern knows something that you don't know, but you should.
Yeah, that's good. Good point. Well, Jonathan, this has been fascinating. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours and hours, but time is constraint today, so we're going to have to end it here. But it's been great talking to you, and thank you for taking the time and being a great guest. And I've learned a lot, and I know I need to learn a lot more. So thanks for being on the show today.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, take care, and good luck with all your future travels. You got a lot going on, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.